Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhassa. I'm going to offer this evening some thoughts on practice around sleeping and dreaming. We spend a third of our existence on average asleep, and I think most people just regard that as totally lost time. But we can actually extend consciousness into the sleep states. I'll begin by quoting the Buddha on dreams. In one sutta in the Anguttara Nikaya, he talks about the origins of dreams, and he said there are different kinds of dreams. Some dreams are visions of the past, which could include past lives, visions of the future, prognostications of what's to come, messages from devas, or wind in the belly, meaning just nonsense, just random brain firings and imagination without any real significance. And I think that's important to remember. I remember one person I knew who always wanted to make a big deal out of dreams, and I'd always remind her, could be just wind in the belly. But there are that minority of dreams that have some significance, and even the ones that are wind in the belly, they may have something to teach us. They're products of our own mind, and they may give us some psychological insight into things that we're working on. And everybody dreams. Some people say they don't dream, but they just don't recall their dreams. The mind does dream. It's part of the cycle of life, is the sleep states of dreaming consciousness and deep sleep, which alternate during the night. Deep sleep is consciousness reduced to its bare minimum. In Abhidhamma terms, when one is in deep sleep, it's continuous bhavanga consciousness. Bhavanga is the neutral state of mind. It's like the engine's on, but it's idling in neutral. It's not doing anything. And bhavanga is continuous in deep sleep, but we recur to it often during the day, especially if you're tired or dull, then the mind will slip into bhavanga frequently. One of the features of being very mindful and awake is that you minimize the bhavanga consciousness during waking. But otherwise, if we're not fully mindful, fully awake, then we slip into bhavanga, in and out of that, and then something impinges on consciousness and it pulls us out of bhavanga. But in deep sleep, we're in a continuous state of this bhavanga consciousness. The Thai forest tradition uses the word bhavanga a little differently. You'll see that mentioned in some books by the Thai Ajahns, as they often do. They use terms from Abhidhamma and so on a bit more broadly, loosely, and they refer to bhavanga as a type of meditation that's dull and it's not bright. It's also called Miccha Samadhi or false samadhi, when you fall into a kind of a sleepy, dozy state in meditation. This is what the Thai forest tradition often calls bhavanga, and that's very close to being asleep. It's often Often it's actually dreamy, can slip into kind of dream states. Sleep is something that we need physically and biologically as well as mentally. It's part of being healthy is getting enough sleep, but it's also unhealthy and unproductive spiritually to oversleep. There's an old Chinese saying, he who sleeps more than 6 hours never wakes up. So I don't know that. I have been asked sometimes when people are on retreat, they ask me to recommend how many hours of sleep they should get. And I never like to give a definite number because it varies from individual to individual and it varies on your condition at the moment. If you're very busy and doing a lot, especially a lot with the brain, you're doing a lot of thinking and working with the head during the day, then you probably need more sleep to rest that. If you're doing a lot of meditation during the day, you need a lot less sleep. And it's possible to get by with very little sleep if you're continuously in meditation during the day. You still need to rest the body. You still need to lie down for a time, but you may not even ever go fully to sleep. You don't necessarily need to go unconscious if you have good samadhi for most of the day. I think you can tell if you're oversleeping if after waking up it takes you a long time to feel fully conscious and you're kind of dull and dozy for a long time. That's probably a sign that you've overslept. You've slept too much. It's different from being tired, which you might feel if you've underslept. You know. But if you have the right amount of sleep, you wake up refreshed and bright and ready to go. There's also another brief sutta about the postures of sleeping. And it gives 4 different possibilities. One who sleeps on the left side, that's ordinary or sensual level consciousness. The one who sleeps on their back is ghost level, peta level consciousness. Sleeping on your belly is animal level consciousness. And Buddha always slept on his right side. So that's the most spiritually positive posture for sleeping, is sleeping on the right side. And I think that may have something to do with activation of the brain hemispheres. Because if you're sleeping on your left side, you're going to be breathing through your right nostril, and that will activate the left hemisphere. But if you're sleeping on your right side, you'll be breathing through your left nostril, and that will activate the right hemisphere. There are different practices one can do associated with sleep to try and extend consciousness into the sleep states. One simple one is making an aspiration before you begin falling asleep that you're going to try and catch the last breath falling asleep and the first breath waking up. And then maintain a light awareness of the breathing as you drift off into sleep. Just let the mind go. Don't try and hold on to that awareness of the breath, but just lightly let it be. And having made that aspiration, usually what happens is that people will notice the first breath waking up sooner and easier than the last breath. If you notice the first breath waking up, that's already quite interesting because you wake up instantly. It's like turning a light switch on. You're fully awake. It's not like slowly pulling yourself out of unconsciousness. It's like, bang, you're there, fully conscious, knowing, who you are, what day it is, what you're doing today. Everything's on right away. But it's even more interesting, it's more difficult, but it's even more interesting if you can catch the last breath falling asleep, because then you'll walk consciously across the threshold into the dream state without a break in consciousness. One of the benefits of meditating into sleep is as a rehearsal for death, because as you are falling asleep, the faculties fall away and dissolve in the same order as when you're dying. There comes a point when you're falling asleep, for example, that the faculty of cognitive thinking drops away. And you can see that's quite separate from consciousness, because you can be aware of that being gone. And it's possible you may be alarmed and you may try and think something to bring it back, which you won't really have that option when you're dying. But when you're falling asleep, you can do that. It'll just wake you up a stage and take you longer to fall asleep. But if you just let it go, you'll keep drifting down into the sleep state, losing these various faculties in sequence. And if you succeed in noticing that last breath, it may be the first time it happens, it may be so surprising that it wakes you up. But if you're able to maintain the sleep state, then you're in a lucid dream where you're aware that you're dreaming. And that has the benefit both of extending consciousness into the sleep state. It also teaches us something about the nature of waking consciousness. On a more intuitive level, you understand the working of perception. Because this is essentially what dreaming is the faculty of sanya, perception, not being bound by the senses. In an ordinary waking state, we receive information from the outside universe through the physical senses, and then perception uses that to create a simulation of the world that we actually experience. And I've talked about this often. There's numbers of ways in which that perception can be falsified, can fool us. We can perceive things wrongly. It's not 100% accurate, but most of the time it's good enough to function. And even in the waking state, you can loosen the bounds of perception in many different ways. A very common, trivial one is that everyone has experienced is seeing faces and things in the clouds. With a relaxed mind and letting your imagination play, you can see quite detailed imagery in the clouds or in a fire, or various other things. That's perception being allowed out to play, so to speak. It's not trying to present an accurate representation. And when you're asleep and dreaming, perception is not trying to create an accurate simulation out of the senses. It's just making stuff up based on fragments of memory or information. And there may actually even be sometimes in the dream, there may be some impact of the senses. Sometimes a sound that's in the room can get woven into the dream, but it'll be very loose. The perception will play with it. But most of the dream material is just completely fabricated with no connection to the senses, or the immediate senses. It might be a memory of something sensed. Perhaps I should say a little bit more about the other more significant kinds of dreams that aren't wind in the valley. They're more rare. They will occur occasionally. Visions of the past, which may be just mundane remembrances of your childhood or things that places you've been, but it can also be images or experiences from previous lifetimes, and they may not be completely accurate. They may be mixed up a bit with stuff from this lifetime, but we can have material impinging into the dream state from previous lifetimes. And I think that's probably a bit more common than people realize. You may have encounters with individuals in the dream that you somehow you know this person, but it's not somebody you recognize from this life. Maybe someone you were associated with in a previous life. Sometimes the dream may be an image or an experience of something in the future. There are dreams that prognosticate the future. That occasionally happens, that will have some intimation of what is to come. And messages from Dewas, beings in higher realms, may on very rare occasions choose to communicate some message to a human being through a dream. But most of the dreams, as I say, are the psychological rearrangement of material in our mundane experience, although they can give us psychological insights into the workings of our mind. I don't believe in general there's a universal key for understanding the symbolism of dreams. I think it's too individual. The same symbol might mean something quite different to individuals depending on their life experience, their cultural background, their education, and so on. They're very individual. But in your dreams, you can look out for repeated themes. Sometimes dreams reoccur, that there may be something that you're working on in the depth that just keeps coming up in the dream, and those recurring dreams are probably worth looking at and trying to understand what's behind it. And particularly pay attention if the dream changes a little bit over time, some new developments in the dream. If you're puzzled by the content of a dream, one way of trying to get a new insight into it is to write it out, and then write it out again from the point of view of a different character in the dream. Because as a general rule, all the characters in the dream are going to be aspects of your own mind, of your psyche. One practice for increasing dream recall is to keep a notebook and a pen beside the bed, and whenever you have a dream, turn the light on and just jot it down, even in point form, what you can remember. And this can really increase dream recall if it's done for a while. And you'll find that you dream several times during the night. There's a cycle of maybe about an hour and a half. And you'll wake up and have a dream, and you'll write it down and go back to sleep. And if you want to do some analysis on the dreams later, that's another step you can do. You can look for patterns over time, repeated motifs. But just doing that practice increases dream recall. Even just making a point, making a habit when you do wake up, even if you don't go to the length of writing them down, just to try before you get out of bed or turn the light on, do your best to recount and recall the dream. Once you get up and turn the light on and get active, you're likely to lose the dream. Another practice for inducing lucid dreams that's actually quite effective if you want to experiment with lucid dreaming is to make a point during the day as you're going about your business during the day for 4, 5, 6 times during the day. Just stop for a few moments and ask yourself seriously at kind of random times. Just ask yourself seriously, am I awake now or dreaming? And just take a few moments to seriously introspect and ask yourself that question. And that sets up a habit. And then after some time, after a week or so of doing that, it may occur in your dream that you ask yourself, am I awake or dreaming? And if you are able to answer in the dream, oh, this is a dream, and not wake up, then you're in a lucid dream. The first time it occurs, you're confused and you think you're awake, or else you realize you're dreaming, but it startles you and you wake up. But it comes to the point where you just calmly recognize, oh, I'm dreaming, and carry on dreaming, but consciously. There are some things you can do with a lucid dream. One from Carlos Castaneda's books, he talks about lucid dreaming a lot. One of the things he says is to look at your hands, because there are degrees of lucidity. It's not just on or off. There's slightly lucid dreams where you sort of know you're dreaming, but you don't really have any control, and you keep losing that sense. In other words, there's extremely lucid dreams where you're creating your own reality and you're fully aware of it. And looking at your hands is one way of increasing the lucidity. Another thing to try and do in a lucid dream is to do some walking meditation in the dream. Another thing that's recommended, if you see any books, pick them up and open them up and try and read the book. That will increase your lucidity. There was a time when I was experimenting with this a lot, doing lucid dreaming, and I made it a kind of a project in my dream that I would encounter other characters and I would ask them, okay, are you a creation of my own mind? Or are you an independent entity of some sort? Or perhaps you're another dreamer meeting me here. And I never got a straight answer. I'd get like philosophical gobbledygook. So I kind of give up on that. It's kind of a frustrating project. Another practice from Tibetan Buddhism, which ties into the first one I mentioned about meditating into the sleep state, is to work with the throat chakra, which is the chakra of creation, and it's tied into dreaming. And visualize the lotus for that chakra is a 16-petaled blue lotus. And you visualize that as you focus your awareness on the breath in a gentle way. You also carry this visualization of the lotus at the throat chakra, and that can help you to go to sleep more consciously. The Buddha himself, before he was enlightened, he had a number of prognosticating dreams that told him he would be enlightened. One of them was that he saw himself lying there with his head resting on the Himalaya mountains and his feet in the southern sea. So, meaning his teaching would extend over the whole of Jambudipa. Ajahn Mun, in his biography, he talks about a dream he had as a young monk predicting his attainments. He said that going through the forest, he came across a rotten log, and he walked across the length of the log, and at the end of the log there was a Tipitaka case, that is, a glass case with the suttas in it, but it was locked. He couldn't get it open. And he interprets that dream as the rotten log as a kind of a pun in Pali for the last birth, that this would be his last birth, and or a pun in Thai, I think I should say. This was a symbol or a prediction that this would be his last birth. But the Lakta Pitaka case told him he would never be a great scholar. He would never master the all the scholarly aspects. So I think that's all I can think of to say about sleeping and dreaming at the moment.